Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be talking about how to create great employee experiences in a hybrid world. My name is Mark Elwood, I'm the Marketing Director at Teleware, and I'm going to be hosting today's session, and I'm going to be joined by two fantastic panelists who I'm going to introduce without further hesitation. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Al Cumberworth from Bytes. Good morning, Al.
Very good morning, Mark. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Would you like to just tell everybody a little bit about your role and about your relationship with Teleware?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, Al Cumberworth, I'm the Microsoft Unified Communications Specialist here at Byte. So I've been working with Microsoft for the past 13 years around large-scale desktop transformation projects with a heavy focus on voice and replacing traditional legacy PBXs with Microsoft and voice, and working with the large, expansive partner ecosystem of ISP partners, as well as Microsoft Gold partners, like our good friends at Teleware, who are a Microsoft Gold comms partner and direct routing specialist, who do a lot of our professional services and implementation work and helping customers go on that journey towards voice.
Fantastic. So there should be lots of great insight coming out of you today. So thank you very much for that, Al. And our second panelist is Peter Holland from Poly. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Would mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I sit in the service provider team here at Poly in the UK. So I look after all of the service provider relationships in the UK. My involvement is obviously we've seen a big shift towards Teams in particular with a lot of the service providers globally. So yeah, I've been in the industry 40 years. I just worked out before I jumped on this call. So I've seen a big change, a big transition from when I first started as an apprentice at BT back in '82 to into today's technologies and the way and the different work styles that we're all working in. So yeah.
You must have been a mere child when you started 40 years ago. So
man and boy.
Thank you very much for joining us, and I'm sure there's going to be some great insights coming out of you today. So yeah, I'd like to just explain a little bit more about Teleware and why we're hosting today's session. So at Teleware, we've been working in the market for well over 30 years, and we're communications and collaboration specialists. We've been a Microsoft partner for more than 25 of those 30 years. And our relationship with Byte is much newer. However, it's been particularly exciting as we've been helping customers improve their communication infrastructure, creating efficiencies, saving costs, improving employee experiences, and also improving customer experiences as well. Now, along that relationship that we've forged with Byte, we've been hearing increasingly from customers and prospective customers who are trying to address the challenges of hybrid working. Also, you can see from the logos that we've got here that as Teleware and Bytes, we work with some really recognizable brands out of the market. We also work with some small brands as well. And I think for me, the thing that connects all of these organizations that we work with as Teleware is they also have that appetite for providing outstanding communications and collaboration across their respective organizations. So before we get into the kind of the Q&A session today, and I think it's worth me explaining a little bit more about the format for today. I'm going to be asking questions to Al and to Peter. I'm going to be sharing a little bit of insight that we picked up along the way as well. But I'm also going to be asking you some questions with some poll questions that we prepared in advance. And it would be great if you could respond to those questions, because it's really helpful for us to see what your opinions are and where you are on your journey around hybrid working as well. So when those questions do come up, do get involved. There's also an opportunity for you to ask questions to our panel as well today. So you can ask those in the question section on your screen. So ask those at any time, and then after the panel discussion bit is over, which will take about 30 minutes, I will go to them and ask those to the panel later on. We are recording today's webinar, so just wanted to make you aware of that as well. Okay, so what is hybrid working? Well, I know it's a terminology that we're all familiar with and it's been around for quite a long time, but I think that in the current context, I think that there's a change in expectation from an employee perspective around the being able to work in a way that suits their needs, that enables them to be as productive as possible whilst also maintaining those things that are taking place outside of their working life. But there's also benefits for the employer as well. A hybrid working model can attract and retain the best talent. It can help to create more engaged, healthier, happier employees. And by improving productivity right across the board, that has to be a positive outcome for both the employee and the employer as well. So, on that point though, when it comes to organisations rolling hybrid working out across the organisation, a recent survey that Bytes conducted, they asked what were the biggest priorities for their organisation from a hybrid working perspective. It's quite interesting what you can see here is that the top two results are employee satisfaction and well-being and enabling effective collaboration and productivity. So from my perspective, it's quite reassuring to see those two things coming out at the top there. But Al, when you see these results, kind of, does that tie in with your experience? Are there any surprises in there? And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, the employee satisfaction is definitely obviously something that's very hot topic at the moment. Given, pre-pandemic, it was completely different when people were in the office. You could ensure that they were having the right work environment, they were socializing, they were fit and well, whereas now working from home, that's become so much harder to monitor and manage, especially from a management standpoint. And it's how do you ensure that people are suffering from things like burnout? How are you making sure that they're staying productive? The home working environment is fit for purpose. The technology you're using is the right technology, and obviously things like endpoints. Have they got the right endpoints to be able to do the job? Especially, from a hybrid perspective, when they're returning back to the office and trying to maintain productivity when they're traveling. Having the right devices and things like that becomes massively important. So, looking at things like the persona mapping, understanding those different personas and how you best work with them to ensure their productivity and wellness, is definitely a very hot topic. And obviously, that's the whole premise of what Viva is about. It's about it making sure that your employee experience is, you're getting those valuable insights as business leadership.
I think it's a really good point that you make there, Al, because I think on one level, employees may well be kind of saying and presenting as being fine working at home for long periods of time, but actually, when you dig under the surface, there could well be other issues. So I think you do make some very good points there. Peter, I'm going to bring you in here. Does that tie in with your experience and what you're seeing, or is there anything different from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's an employee's market currently, right? So there's a big pressure on employers to make sure their current employees are satisfied, with the new environment, and giving them, I think, that flexibility, to have some say on how they work. And also, I think it's important, so not just from a retention point of view, but I think from attracting new employees as well. I think the best talent are able to cherry pick at the minute, and I think if you don't have a flexible approach, hybrid approach to working, then you may lose your best talent and may not be able to attract the best talent. So I think it's quite a key sort of interesting period of time that we're going through, I think, in terms of employer-employee relationship and that whole retention. That I know Poly has done its own surveys. I think they're about to publish one, and I think they said that about 40 or 50% of people interviewed were currently looking at other alternatives, not because of pay or anything like that. It was to do with, whether they're allowed to be flexible in their approach to working. So yeah, really interesting times, I'd say.
Yeah, and we'll come back and we'll touch on that point again in a bit more detail further on. But I think it is absolutely crucial for organisations to really get their head around hybrid working for that reason specifically. So yes, thanks for that. That's a really good point. Now, there may have been a slight technical hitch, but I'm going to come to the first poll question. So if you did happen to see the question and have already answered it, do answer again. So our first poll question is, what is the biggest challenge from your perspective in implementing hybrid working? So is it around communication and collaboration? Is it around security? The office environment, so there are changes kind of needed in the office environment to make it suitable for hybrid working. Is that a problem that you're tackling? Keeping track of where colleagues are, and people and HR policy changes, is that something that's kind of proven to be an issue for you, or is it something else? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to answer that question if you haven't already. I think that yeah, certainly from my perspective, when we're talking to people out in the market, there's definitely some common themes that are coming to the fore here around collaboration, productivity, employee experience, and the attraction and retention of the best talent. So I will just leave it for a few more seconds and hopefully in the very short amount of time, we'll start to get some results coming through. So what I'm seeing is that 33% of you have said that it's collaboration and communication being the key priority. 25% have said it's security. And a further 25% have said it's about the office environment actually being no longer suitable. So, Al, what does that tell you? Kind of any kind of big surprises in there for you?
I think we see quite a lot of consistency when we're asking poll questions around how are you facing the challenges with this new working environment, and it is about how you create that better employee experience, and getting those insights into those employee experience becomes really, really important. There's the amount of customers that I work with that have got people working from home. And it's completely different from being in the office, right, where your IT department's architected the infrastructure in such a way that it's always best quality of service. The experience is always pretty spot on. But now you've gone from working back at home with flaky internet connections, maybe not the best Wi-Fi connections, people saturating the bandwidths that you've got, so it has quality degradation. So there's all of these elements that need to be understood in, as well as how do you get people working from home trained and adopted? If you've got new people starting and coming on board, then how do you get those guys developing that sort of skill path for them so they can do all the onboarding process but do it remotely? So it's very much that sort of work from anywhere, and how do you ensure that experience is the best experience possible?
Yeah, and I think for me, I've been working in a hybrid way for many years now, well before the pandemic. But then when COVID hit and everybody was working from home, I actually had a better experience because we were all working in this kind of video way, and it created a level of experience whereas previously, if I'd been a person working from home, I was often at a disadvantage. Now we're going to more of a hybrid world, noticing signs of that starting to revert back. So I think that there's some real opportunities for employers to actually create that experience in the office that brings people who aren't in the office more into what's going on there to create more of a level playing field in that hybrid world. Peter, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts about what the results are, what Al or I've just been talking about.
No, I think I agree with what you said, really. I think, so I'm in a similar situation to you. I've been officially a home worker for over 20 years. Right? So lockdown didn't really change much for me, but I did see the rest of the family get impacted with it. So it was interesting to look at the experiences they went through. And, communicating and collaboration is obviously the key one, right? And the challenges around broadband. So we actually had an extra broadband line put in because my broadband couldn't cope with 3 people working at home. so that was the onus was on us really to do that. But yeah, just that move to, as you said, Mark, really that move to almost feeling more inclusive because everybody's in the same boat as you now. So gone are the days when you join an audio, a company audio conference or a team call, and there's no video, it's just audio, and you're trying to get your point across, and people start talking over each other, and you can't, and in the end you sort of give up and go, nobody's really listening to what I'm saying, and you tend to switch off. Whereas I think with Teams and video, it's much more interactive. People can see your expressions, they can see if you're fed up or if you want to say something, so absolutely, it's had a lot of, I think it's brought a lot of benefits actually, the lockdown with hybrid approach.
Yeah, from a productivity standpoint, 100%. I mean, what I've been finding quite recently is obviously, the amount of uptake on video. So pre-pandemic, back into sort of Skype for Business world, you would probably find that only 5% of everybody that had Skype for Business would enable video. Yeah. So now what we're seeing with this return is everybody's enabling video, and when that you're looking at it from a hybrid perspective, and you've got meeting rooms, you've got people joining internally, externally. That all puts impact and congestion on things like network and call quality degradation, right down to how your meeting room is set up. If you've got one microphone sat there and you've got people talking amongst themselves, and there's somebody either in the car or working from home, it becomes a nightmare because you've got, to your point, people talking over the top of each other, and the other person at the end of the phone can't understand who's saying what. But obviously, looking at what technology and those issues that have been solved by technology, obviously from what you guys are doing within Poly, that those sort of challenges can be overcome. But there's so much in that sort of planning and preparation that I've seen, customers not really doing. They've just, again, hit that big red panic button, not really thought about, what are the consequences further down the line.
No, absolutely.
So the next question, I've started to touch on this already, but why is it so big right now? What is it, why is it just a buzzword, or is it something that's here to stay? Peter, what are your thoughts on
that? Well, as we've discussed, really, I think, so pre-pandemic, I guess, we had home workers and we had office-based workers, and it was defined, where you lived on your location from the office. So my headquarters is Maidenhead. I live in South Wales, so not the best commute really, hence why I'm a home worker. So it was defined by your location, your job role, potentially whether you needed to be in the office or not. But then if you look at the technology side of it, and obviously I'm going to come at this a little bit because I work at Poly, connectivity, and if this pandemic had happened 20 years ago, the economy would have fallen to pieces, right? We would never have coped, right? Because connectivity across broadband, connectivity across mobile speeds, give you a much better video, as we're talking about video at the moment, experience. When I joined Poly, which was Polygon 5 years ago, and I used to join video calls, and they'd say, "Pete, we can't see you. You're pixelated, whatever," because the broadband just couldn't cope. Right now, I have the best broadband in the woods still, but it's much better. Hopefully, people can see me clearly and hear me clearly on this. So I think that's made it more inclusive to everybody who who need to work remotely at some point in time as well. So and then also I think that cloud-based services are much more reliable now, and even down to the softline applications, they're much more easier and intuitive to use. And interestingly, I think lockdown almost forced users to adopt new technologies like Microsoft Teams. They didn't have a lot of choice. Right? We had a couple of days. I think it's almost 24 months to the day, right? 2 years to the day. I think the government came out and said, right, a couple of days, everyone must work from home, right? So we were all put in this position where suddenly employers are making decisions on what they were going to do, what strategies they're going to deploy. Some people didn't have strategies. I know people were sent home with handsets and things like that, right? So but it's just become more. Users have been forced in a way. I use forced in inverted commas, to adopt those new technologies, such and use some applications such as video, right? So, and even down to hardware, laptops are much more powerful and capable nowadays. Noise cancelling headsets, good personal webcams and things like that have all made it possible. So I think it's, I hope I'm answering the question, but I think it's made it more accessible to the masses than it was, probably pre-pandemic.
I think you're right, and I'm kind of going to ask my next question to you, Albert. So Peter described we all went and worked at home, but then now as we've kind of started to move back into working in the office, at least part of the time, what are some of those differences, and why does it matter? Can we not just do what we've done and send everybody home and kind of, well, that just work for hybrid working?
Yeah, I think there's obviously been a lot of surveys done around this, and going back to your point, is hybrid working here to stay? Yeah, absolutely, because it's giving people that work lifestyle balance, and if people can save 2 or 3 hours travel time per day, that then has an increase in productivity as well. I mean, the difference between home and hybrid working, so, people returning back into the office, the big challenge that I'm seeing now is, at the start of it, people just got into this habit of being on back-to-back video calls for 6 to 8 hours a day, and suffering from burnout and fatigue, has been a big challenge for a lot of organizations, how they deal with that. But I think with people returning back into the office, it's so important for people to also be spending 1 or 2 days back in the office with the colleagues and making sure that time's used productively. But it is, again, that challenge of, well, if you've got to travel for an hour or 2 hours per day, how do you then maximize that productivity in that time? So, do you have calls in the car? Do you know what's the best working practices? And this is all the considerations that kind of need to be taken into account. So yeah, that's kind of my sort of view on the world. Peter, I don't know what's your thoughts?
Yeah, again, it's it's definitely giving that flexibility and choice, I think, to the employee, on where they think they're best suited to, complete a task. Really, I think, it's great working at home, and obviously at home environments differ. Right? So, I'm lucky. I live quite remotely. My children are grown up, so I've got no distractions. I've got my own room, and I can focus. But at the same time, there may be tasks that need to be completed where I need to, work with my colleagues in a more personal sort of approach, and go into the office and sit down with them and bounce ideas off each other. I think we all recognise sometimes it's easier to bounce ideas off people when you're physically together. So, there's some significant differences between, home working and hybrid working, and I think it's almost like a common sense approach, right? Allow your workers to, within some boundaries, allow your employees to decide where I need to be on a particular day. Am I better off suited working at home, or am I better off going to the offices, right? And again, from our perspective, it's making sure that you equip the employees, with the right tools to do the job when they're at home or when they're in the office, and as we know, the office environment is changing now, where employees are looking at creating specific focus spaces, quiet areas, collaboration spaces. So once you go into the office, you might not be going back into that traditional leisure desk, sit down work all day. I think the whole approach to how we collaborate with each other is changing, or has changed.
I think it's a really good point. I think that the role of the office, I think, is going to change quite fundamentally. The purpose of it, what people do in the office, because it's no longer a place you go to every day just because that's where you work. I think it's going to be a much more specific space and the uses of that space. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how the role of the office changes over the next few years. Okay, I'm going to go to the audience now with our next poll question. So, where is your business in the transition to hybrid working? So I'll put some proposed answers here. So we're just starting out. We've implemented hybrid working, but there's still much more that we need to do to get it working effectively. We've made some good progress. So, for example, we might have changed the office environment or introduced new technologies. We've done everything that we need to do for now, being the final option. So I'll give you a few seconds to select your most appropriate response to that question. I think it'd be interesting to see where people are on this, because obviously anybody coming along to this webinar today has got some sort of interest in it. So it'll be interesting to see how far people are along that hybrid working journey. So the results, sorry, I do apologise for not being able to share these results with you, but the platform that we're using today just doesn't really allow us to do that. So apologies for that, but I'm getting the information fed through to me. So the top answer with 50% of respondees have said that option 2, so they've implemented something to do with hybrid working, but there's more work to do to get it working effectively. And 35% of respondents chose option 3, so making some good progress. So they've started to introduce things like office environment changes or some new technologies specifically to aid them with their hybrid working. So Peter, what are your thoughts on that? Does that kind of surprise you? Is that kind of where you expected people to be?
No, it doesn't surprise me. It's actually, I think, certainly the where they've rolled it out, but there's still some work to do to resonate. So I think, again, if you go back to what I said earlier on about the pandemic, it was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, everyone's got to work at home. What are we going to do? And some companies may have already had some sort of strategy for remote workers. Many didn't. I can give you an example where I was trying to call a well-known British satellite TV company because my broadband had gone down after a couple of days, and their phone lines were just off. They just said we're unable to take your call permanently. So clearly they didn't deploy any sort of DR or work from home strategy, and they lost me as a customer as a result of it. So we've seen people rolling out strategies. I guess one thing that we've seen because of that sort of, hindsight's a wonderful thing, as they say, right? And it's easy to sit back and say you could have done this better, but I think it is important to review what you have done. So again, if I look at it from a Poly perspective, if I take headsets as an example, we, along with every other headset manufacturer in the world, ran out of headsets by mid-April 2 years ago. Right, so everybody wanted a headset for obvious reasons, working at home, and so strategies seem to be, let's go and buy some headsets and let's try to get you something that's suitable. And then it was like, well, actually the shelves are empty, so let's just try to get a headset. And then the third one was like, we can't get a headset, go down to your local, it's not Curry's anymore, they don't exist, but whatever it is, PC World or whatever, and just buy a headset and expense it type thing. The point I'm getting to is that, we all went through that phase early on of, dogs barking, neighbors mowing the garden, kids screaming in the background, TVs, whatever it is. And we all put up with it and we joked about it for a couple of months, because we're all in the same boat. 2 years down the line, people don't expect that anymore. They expect a professional call. So I would say, you need to sort of review your strategy as you're going down, sort of continue to sharpen the saw, as we say. So what have we done? Is it working? Not just from a, have we invested in the right thing, but also is it being used, right? Have your users actually adopted the technologies that you've deployed, right? Because it's all very well going, oh, great, everyone's got Teams and they've done this and we've done that. But if users are still not using it, then there's something wrong, right? And maybe they're not communicating properly. Maybe it's a training thing. Maybe they don't understand how to use the technology, and we've all assumed that they do. So, checks and balances, I would say, is probably a really important thing if you have already gone down that route of, deploying.
Sure. Right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question. So, why do we think there's so much focus on employee experience at the moment? I know we've kind of started to touch on it with some of the earlier poll questions, but Al, I'm going to come to you on that. What are your thoughts on the whole employee experience movement at the moment?
There's definitely been a lot of focus on employee well-being, you know, and obviously we all know how impacted people have been throughout, you know, the various different lockdowns. And you know, by the third lockdown, you know, people that I was speaking to and business leadership that I was speaking to were finding that employees were getting, you know, more and more struggling more and more on a day-to-day basis, because they're just not around other people. They're just working, you know, working at home. You've got kids, you know, you've got a partner, you know, you've got a lot of things going on, and it becomes quite stressful, and that impact is obviously a negative impact. So the realization from a lot of organizations, and you know, that's coming up from a global level, is that employee well-being, productivity and happiness in the workplace should be front and center of everything that you're trying to do. So delivering those better employee experiences to make sure that, you know, your workforce is happy, maintained, focused, and being productive as possible has become front and center priority for a lot of business leadership.
Yeah, and Peter, you touched on earlier about the fact that the market is so competitive. So if an employer doesn't offer hybrid working, or indeed if they say they're doing hybrid working but don't do it well, and in fact the employee experience is poor, then surely that opens them up to kind of a drain of the best possible talent, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and also, you know, I think, you know, the employee experience is actually being, you know, being heard, you know, being valued, you know, and that's really important when you're working remotely, right? To understand, so that experience of, I can tell that you know, people understand what I'm saying because they can see me and hear me, and I'm being included in, you know, in the conversation. Or, you know, I've raised my hand virtually because I want to ask an important point, or I put it in the chat box and someone says, oh, people's got something to add. You just feel more valued as an employee. So I think that whole experience around feeling inclusive, you know, included in the calls and the decision making is really important from a job satisfaction point of view. And that obviously, you know, happier employees, better production, right? So better productivity. So, you know, it's.
Yeah, so I'm going to move on. So we talked about why employee experiences are important, but if we're talking about great employee experience in the hybrid world, what do they look like? What are employees looking for? Whether they're in the office, whether they're working at home, whether they're working somewhere else entirely, what does great experience look like? Al?
It's a good question because you've got a couple of different levels, haven't you, in terms of employee experience. So there's the experience of using the technology that you use on a day-to-day basis to conduct your work. And you know, working from home presents a massive challenge for IT departments about how do you guarantee a good quality of service and a good quality of experience on component parts of infrastructure you don't manage and have no control over. And that's becoming one of the biggest areas I'm seeing from a technology standpoint. So people have implemented Teams, people might have implemented Teams voice. You know, how do you then ensure that wherever that employee is, if they're having issues, you know, if they're having poor video quality or the audio is chopping in and out, that you can be able to remediate it and understand what the problem is and allow that visibility back to the IT department in order to say, right, to be able to better support hybrid working moving forward, this needs to be our longer term strategy plan. You know, and a lot of that through sort of real estate consolidation, you know, people realizing savings, but there is also the acknowledgement of reinvestment into making that working from home environment, you know, better, and making sure that, you know, if there's a single point of failure, that doesn't become an issue from employees being able to do the job day to day. And then again, you know, just general health and well-being. You know, again, we see a lot of information coming around Viva, you know, and all the insights you can get from things like Viva and all the analytics. You know, you can start to use that to ensure that, you know, people aren't suffering from burnout, that, you know, the productivity is measured. And it's even things like not always having video on, and being able to get up and stretch your leg and maybe just join one or two meetings via audio, so you're not just sat behind a desk all day, because again, that comes with its own problems in terms of neck pains, back pains. You know, people who haven't got a good working environment at home, you know, we're going to suffer from those type of things, and we see that, you know, especially with with myself, I've had those sort of issues as well, where my working environment wasn't the best setup to start off with, and you just end up with neck pain, and that then becomes a bit of a challenge.
So I'm going to bring you in now, Peter. So Al's talked quite a lot about the home environment and how to create good employee experiences at home. What about the office? Have you got any thoughts around how to create better hybrid employee experiences when people are in the office?
Absolutely. So I think I think that it's important that users, whatever application they're using at home. So if they're using Teams at home, they're using Teams on their laptop. When they go into the office, it's a familiar look and feel, right? So if I can set a Teams call up and join a Teams call on my laptop at home, I should be able to go into a meeting room, wherever that meeting room sits 50 people. I should have the same experience. I'm not going to sit in the call. Traditionally, people would sit in the opposite end of the video conference equipment, right? And there'd be a remote control on the table, and everyone would shy away from it, going, can somebody call IT because our call should have started 5 minutes ago, right? And then your meeting falls apart, right? So I think from a technology point of view, that sort of familiar look and feel, doesn't matter where I am. I could be on my home desk on my PC. I could be traveling on my mobile. I could be in the office. Giving them that consistent approach to meetings, if it's a sort of a video meeting or whatever, I think that's really key. And again, going back to redesigning the office, I think the days of having sort of desks and a big boardroom with your sort of 20-foot long table and 30 chairs sat around it and a screen at one end, as Al said earlier on. You need to look at that and understand how people now want to collaborate, because I think it's an age thing. I'm quite long in the tooth, but I think it's an age thing in terms of how people choose to collaborate, but also we've got used to collaborating in different ways. So I think taking that experience into the office and making the office almost like a fun place, a nice place, somewhere that you do want to go. You do want to go into the office as well. So it's not like I'm going to sit at home 5 days a week. Actually, on certain occasions, I do want to go in the office, and it's a good environment to be in. So I think that's really important, to give the employees a good user experience wherever they are, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely kind of those themes of collaboration and communication are naturally rising to the top in terms of creating those great employee experiences. And if they fall down in any way, shape, or form, I think that employee experience kind of score would instantly start to drop. So let's delve a little bit further into some of the technologies that are available, that are around, that are helping to create those good kind of collaboration and communication experiences. Let's go to you first on this point, because I know obviously with your Microsoft background and Bytes, Teleware, could you just explain a little bit more detail around how that all fits together?
I mean, I could spend an hour and a half just talking around this.
No, we've not got time for that.
Yeah, it's such a wide subject matter. But it's I mean, in summary, a lot of it just comes down to the planning and preparation. Doing due diligence, looking at where people are accessing information from, what best practices are. Especially from an implementation standpoint, if you look at things like Teams. It's huge in terms of what it can deliver, and then when you start to look under the hood around what you can do with things like data classification, endpoint management, how you manage all this, how you lock and secure endpoints down, right through to how you monitor the network for quality of service and quality of experience, being able to troubleshoot any issues across the network, whether it's a headset, whether it's a VCU, whether it's a switch or router or firewall or proxy. It's about having that insight, and that's becomes the biggest thing that I see. It's having data insights into what is going on in your business around all of the key elements, and that reporting and analytics, which is all part of the 365 stack when you get under the hood of it. But also being able to give that, single pane of glass experience, whether you're a contact center agent, whether you're an FCA regulated employee, all of these things need to be designed in, scoped in, properly planned out, and doing that due diligence around, again, what Polly's been doing for years and years around persona mapping, understanding your employee, what their working environment is like, and then supporting them with the right technology and the right tools to be able to do the job as productively as possible.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to bring in a bit more of the Teleware type stuff in there as well, because I don't think I'd be doing my job if I didn't. So just explain a little bit about some of the products that we're adding into the portfolio there around that are helping businesses around contact centers or voice capabilities within teams, those types of things.
Yeah, so obviously from a Microsoft Bytes and Teleware standpoint, then, you know, the biggest thing that we've seen over the last couple of years is that shift away from traditional on-premise PBXs, you know, like Cisco, Mitel, and Avaya, and then trying to utilize or move to a more cloud-based solution that's based on Microsoft Teams. But it's the challenge of people understanding, well, what are the best practices in order for me to get from point A to point B? And, you know, trying to do that yourselves, you know, I've seen personally customers who have gone in there, they've kind of, you know, read up on what direct routing is, they've deployed a couple of SBCs on premise, they've got 8x8 for a contact center, for example, and their call routing is a complete mess, and they're having call aggregations, drop out, customer services are going mental, and nobody can troubleshoot what the issue is, and they've still got ongoing issues, you know, months and months down the line. But working with, you know, core strategic partners, Microsoft Gold partners, Microsoft certified architects, and just, you know, having the best in breed people to be able to then understand how you design in that solution to make sure it's fit for purpose, you know, and whether that's, we're talking Microsoft Voice, whether we're talking, you know, Microsoft Contact Center, call recording, compliance, all of these elements, you know, and that's effectively why Bytes work with Teleware, because of that level and breadth and depth of knowledge. And then again, you know, having the understanding around, if you are kind of looking at moving workloads from a security perspective, how you do that, and what the best practices are around that, because that's again another area where, you know, Teleware's got great expertise as well.
Okay, I have got a follow-up question for you, Al, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to bring Peter in at this stage, because I know, Peter, obviously this is a subject that's very close to the heart, but I think it'd be quite useful just to explain some of the work that you are doing in this space.
No, absolutely. So Polycom. So Poly was previously, well, Poly is a combination of Polycom and Plantronics, but Polycom, which is a company I joined 5 years ago, has had a relationship with Microsoft for 20 years. Right? So we've gone through all of those, Link, Skype for Business, Teams, reiterations and iterations. And you know, what's key is team certification. You know, it works out of the box. We understand Microsoft understand us. It's that ease of use from a technology point of view, as far as we're concerned. You know, being able to plug a headset into a handset and it works, which can quite often be a challenge. And as I said, you know, from a meetings perspective, just having that simplified approach. I can join a meeting from my laptop. I can go into a meeting room and I can just click join meeting from that meeting room. Exactly the same experience. So just simplifying that, for me, the key is, and I think this is why it's been so successful, is that simplification from a user perspective, that familiarity, the use, the look and feel of it all being the same, just allows employees to engage more with that technology and therefore engage more with their fellow employees.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. It sounds really interesting. Al, going back to you talked about the Microsoft side of things. One of the questions I've got around this is, obviously, organizations will decide which type of license is best for them, and they may have decided that before hybrid working was really on their agenda. If they were to kind of look at the most appropriate license from a hybrid working perspective, what sort of things should they be considering? And is it kind of, I know a lot of people are on E3, should we go down to E5, or is it something else, something other than that? Would you mind just kind of give us a little bit of background as well?
It's a tough question, because every organisation is always going to be slightly different, whether you're in education, you know, whether you're in government, whether you're in private sector, you know, depending on what you want that employee to have in terms of their desktop applications, then most organizations are either kind of E1, E3, A1, A3, F1, F3, and then bolting on additional technologies. The ones that have kind of made that leap to E5 have had a business case justified to do that, which effectively relies on 3 component pieces. One's been voice, implementing a Microsoft pure voice strategy, so whether that's direct routing, Operator Connect, or whether you're using PSTN calling plans, and then looking at the security workloads, so moving traditional on-premise elements into M365 and utilizing them. And then obviously the Power BI that's the kind of the trajectory where quite a few organizations are going, because they just realize the power of having everything in one interface and one vendor, and obviously having the power of Microsoft and that hyperscale cloud computing ability, and that makes such a massive difference to organizations. So there's a lot you've got to kind of consider the business case and which license is going to be relevant, because effectively you could just give somebody an F1 license, add a phone system license to it, and they've got calling for a relatively cheap price, but that comes with disadvantages in terms of it's all web-based access, so it doesn't fit everybody. What I would suggest is organizations go through the due diligence when they're looking at licensing and what's going to work out best, and go through that planning to obviously understand at what time they should be looking at what license and how that's going to affect the TCO.
Okay, right. And I know there's a slide you wanted to share some information around this type of thing, so I'll come on to that in a second. But just to remind everybody, if you've got a burning question, do fire it through. Just a gentle reminder there. But oh, sorry, apologies. Yeah, talk us through this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously when it comes to voice, the only thing that you now have that includes phone system license is E5. So everything outside of E5, you need to attach the phone system license to. So whether that's as I mentioned, E1, E3, F1, and anything else like that is just an add-on, whether it's business premium or business standard. So quite straightforward. The only thing you get voice included in is Microsoft E5.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Okay, so if I've been listening to today as a delegate, as a viewer, and kind of I'm early on in my journey towards hybrid working, I've listened to some great information that you've both shared today, but what hints and tips would you say if I'm getting started, the things that I should do, or even the things that I should avoid in kind of getting going with my hybrid working strategy? Peter, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, okay, so I think that personas is a key one, and I'll mention this, right? So understanding your workforce, understanding each individual personas. We've got a set of personas. I think there's 7 personas that sit across a typical enterprise now. You might not want to deploy all 7, but it's a good starting point, and you can identify those personas within your organization, and make sure then that you're giving those employees the right tools for their roles, right? So that's the first thing, I think. I think the other ones are really more sort of people specific, right? So like I said, make hybrid workers feel that they're being heard and valued and supported, right? Make them feel included in the organization. I would say, going back to staff retention and attraction, be flexible, right? If you set down rules saying you must be in the office at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and there's no particular reason why, then you can alienate people. So have a flexible approach to hybrid working, and be people-centric, right? Listen to your employees. At the end of the day, it's the employees that are going to make your business a success. So, have that flexible approach to, allowing people to work in a way that suits them, but also suits the business as well. So I think part of the technology for a minute, I think it's very much about, listening to your employees and trying to fit in with your employees' requirements. Obviously suiting your business as well.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Peter. Al?
Yeah, so I mean, I think mine come from more my technical background. So, one thing that I do see a lot of people that are missing is, do the kind of network testing elements before you go and put something into full production. Stress test your network out, make sure that if there is issues that you're finding once you've got, synthetic transactions fired across the network and, core concurrency rates set at a certain parameter, that if there are issues that you're resolving them before you roll it out into full production to ensure that you are going to get that good quality of experience from an end user perspective. The other thing as well is with the rate of change, and obviously, Microsoft bringing out new features and functionality every day, think about change management and how you communicate that change effectively out to the organization. And then again, same point as Peter, ensuring that your employees they are as productive and being looked after as well as possible.
Great, thank you very much for that, Al. So I have my final poll question for you, the audience. So obviously hybrid working is a huge subject matter and it's quite complex in terms of understanding the technologies that are available to enable you to best employ hybrid working strategies. We actually run workshops in conjunction with Microsoft and Bytes around modernizing communications, which explore hybrid working requirements. If you would like to register your interest to find out more about these workshops, you can do so by responding to this poll question. So if you'd be interested in a modernized communication workshop, answer yes, no, or indeed maybe if it's kind of something that you don't know whether you want to you're not sure at the moment. So do feel free to answer that question. So, gentlemen, as of now, your answers seem to have been so good that we've not really had any questions coming through from our audience, and I think that is because everything's been absolutely answered really with great expertise and completeness. So, bearing that in mind, I will thank you both for your time today. It's been great. It's been a great discussion. It's been great getting your expertise and finding out more about your thoughts and views on hybrid working. It's obviously a subject that is very close to the heart of lots of people at the moment. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts today. Thank you very much. And thank you to you, the audience. Thanks for listening. Thanks for getting involved in those poll questions. There's been some really interesting insights coming out of that. So without further ado, I would like to wrap up for today and hope to see you all soon next time.
Thank you.
Cheers.